kadi tui ta de kadi de na ta ni se ki lo ta wa ji kadi ne de ge na ka lo ka jeban zamala de zawa chimbu zi sai shi ji chiwo sho lai ra.
So we look at the first verse, and if we have to go into the commentary themselves, then the commentaries are very extensive. So as such, I will try to offer you a direct word-to-word commentary on the root text itself. So by thinking of all sentient beings as more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, for accomplishing the highest aim, I will always hold them dear. So when we look at this verse, it's an instruction on how to cherish others. And when we look at the example that it cites, by thinking of all sentient beings as more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. So a wish-fulfilling jewel is a jewel, a sort of a mythical jewel, that is supposed to grant all your needs and wants. And now, by thinking of all sentient beings as even more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, for accomplishing the highest aim herein refers to enlightenment. I will always hold them dear, because achieving the highest aim of enlightenment can actually afford us the ability to fulfill the aspirations and needs and wishes of all sentient beings. So as such, you will think all sentient beings as more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. For accomplishing the highest aim, I will always hold them dear. So without sentient beings, it is impossible for us to cultivate a spiritual practice that can lead us towards enlightenment. So as such, you cherish sentient beings as even more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel.
답변은 저기 대상에서 지금 예신노부터 있는데 가서 나도 있는 통만이라 지난 예신노블에 근데 근주 서서 가래 있는데 봐 참만 죽더니 짜와 첨부질래서 다 대상에서 배제 시원에 지세도 무대도 렌다 첨부에 짜와 첨부냐기다 얘네 근데도 근데 중에는 간시대 간지 짜라 짜와 첨부도 생이 기 감로 루서 템불루야다 아니지 그말라 마셔야지데 야포냐야도 느리페지 나라서 짜라 가래 있는데 지거라 짜와 첨부도 라 드나시기 다 수수기 지게 단단한서 다기 류디니 때네 아니 신 심장 한실에 고토야기 되게 니바에나 디야 칼로 싸워치무냐고야다 아니 단다디 칼라나 신 심장 한실에 레아고 공고라 근데 사지고 고마한테 치디 신 심장 한실에야 따도 되 그래서 제번제바 되다도 수수기 제외기 아니 토라 샤고야 돼 근데 송다.
So if we find it a little bit difficult to relate to such a metaphor as a wish-fulfilling jewel, then we can begin to relate to this verse in this manner. If you have gold and other precious items in your possession, then look at the manner in which you cherish these precious items in your possession. You will try to keep it in a safe place. You will try to ensure that it doesn't get destroyed. You will try to ensure that it doesn't get stolen and so forth. So similarly, we should be able to cherish other sentient beings as something precious, something that we cannot do without if we are to achieve the far-reaching goals of liberation and enlightenment. Because without the basis of other sentient beings, it is very, very difficult for us to cultivate an effective spiritual practice that can lead us towards liberation and enlightenment.
나니 시로가 니바들 칼라나 달라 신지 타도기 셰고라소 메리페 총카랑기 렘바다 제카진람 보셔라 나디기 카르송올라나 다수수기 지기 가레이나 주노로제나 줄랑초이나 로조이나 한다 소소테지 야가로 차이나 미신발레 라
디스슈아 기시마라 니바디 따다레마스탄다 나발라 갑두 만토서
슐리 알레 니 인자서 본다 어다 단들라 다들 니바드 칼라나라 간드 스탄 초베체스 라 대변은 아주 담보자드는데 간다 스드 초베체 다니 건라 멘다신스 젠라 삼바 타바이 초도 제반 zem바쇼스라 다 Kanda la di kara nganzo ne sacha kawa dowa ina rwa tata peda nga sacha tubula dowa sacha shivala dowa ta sacha kandeji dowa ina kondro che sa shi ina kandeji dowa ina rwa kanda sida dobi tala mi sida sina miri sida sina ina re chi gejen sida sina ina kandeji tuwa ina rwa kanda sida dobi zeta ne kanda midi kandeji tuwa ina yaas dobi zena ani dani ikko le me dashi ta sacha nganzo kasa kalanda mi sam tada ndamanda Cheba kedan damda, ani chik namju tendan damda, ligdo, right? Na tsunaji madena nganzo pa taun digal, namju damda thongdo, right? Mikashi le ido wanda, mikashi le mama, tan damda nganzo chi thongde yor, right? Pagi ngola ya, ngone ki thado ngosu yone mena mishide, ngaranzo nangdo patron jo yore, chinga ki tsi chejo, chidangi damda thongda yor. Tende indigala ta, rani kaadun do ti tsela, ani dāni kōng le sē mēn tāshī la dī, anī sōsō ki pāgī ki mī kāndē jī chē mē la mā tē bā sōsō ki mēn sā zhōng gō rē lō, rā. Dāni kōng le mē tāshī ngī la dī gā la, anī sōsō ki mēn sā zhōng wā yī na, anī kāla nā mī ki chī ki zām dā ngā tsō tōng chū tē chē sē bā tā rē rā. Yī nē yā rā ki ngā jē tē pē kī mā rē, rā nī mē bā tā wē na, rā nī ngā mā tō mē, ngā lē kō lē lā jī mē sām dē na, anī ngā jē yā pē rō dā. Tēndē dī gā la, anī mē shēmbā jī chūk tsū lā nā sā wā rā, pē khun lā jī rā. 아니 다 라니 가디네 데컨데 가디나 멤버다 와다 아니 젠라 상바타 봐 다가 탑던 집어 마인게 젠라 니 탁바네 라 초드 집은 좀 마실라데 젠라 다 지구다 자와다 니제다 다 간지 베 칼로데 연면에데 콘 밀라 초드 집어 통샤고래 해라지 라
So, moving on, whenever I am in the company of others, I will regard myself as the lowest among all, and from the depths of my heart, cherish others as supreme. Now, at all times, in all places, whoever you come into contact with, it is important to cultivate an attitude of humility in your interactions with them, irrespective of the other's behavior, irrespective of the manner in which others carry themselves, irrespective of the time, place, and the situation you find yourself in. It is always important to cultivate an attitude of humility. And this attitude of humility should not be something superficial. And from the depths of my heart, cherish others as supreme. So, as opposed to an artificial, superficial attitude of humility, it should be a genuine attitude of humility, wherein you look at and treat others with respect and concern. So this is to help us to overcome any kind of hubris, any kind of arrogance that we might develop in our interactions with others.
진짜가 산다나지 엔데 사무다는 맞아 밀파 컬러 미올 굿이나 신야지 땅그래 마체 엔데로 튕이다 밀파 야부치나 아 이네야 미기라시 마체디 디라 파야부치는 세야부체 춘이로지라 파두제진 스 이네 레순지 소소 파냠중데 야부치는 야지신이 이지라 됐어서 따지지라 소소 단도냐지시 소소 잘라토 간이모 가르치네 단도파 올 굿에 칼카버데 된데서 투마라 이마 군두게 직송다 지당 안좀 밀파 야부치다 디 개청버레스라 아니 takadine 동주로 치수로 되니 지디나 아니 깨라 짐발라 샤즈 주여레송도 다디 간데 가르라이게냐 테즈 파카데자 고르도 식송에서라 된다 된데르다 된데 중에 그 칼로니데 된데 코스라 딱 한지 만지기 미기랑 시장 가서 미스도 쓰이나 파야보시는 저야보시 준이로이다 이내 레송지 잡아야라는 요 말이라 가시기 고급 쓰이는 그냥 집에 냠주지들이야 고급 쓰이지 도들 가서 돈이 간내지고 따기때 제야면도 나베미 제스 따지 거르이나 된데서되는 칼카보다 라
So now, when we look at a verse like this, I'm sure that many of you have the concern that if we always assume an attitude of humility, trying to regard ourselves as lower than others, then we would also always be subject to intimidation, subject to harassment and so forth. But that is beside the point. This is trying to highlight the fact that when we look at people in general, then there is no one who does not truly appreciate humility in their interactions with others. Generally, all people do appreciate humility in their interaction as opposed to arrogance. Nobody really appreciates and enjoys interacting with an arrogant person. This is what it means. And now, with the concern about being subject to intimidation, harassment, and so forth, then at this point it is important to use our own discerning intelligence, that maybe this is not the attitude, maybe this is not helpful in this kind of situations. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama also says that even though it is good to be kind, to be helpful to others, to be humble in your interactions with others, but if you do begin to notice that others are taking advantage of you, others are taking things for granted, then it is important to take a stand for yourself in these situations.
Tadi indiga tandadi soso mesa zunra rani kola me ta goya jinse ji kora kola ra ti khasan rani mesa zuina rani ngaje ma chatu ra ngaje chaya gi juru chegda ti chena zamza ngaje shuer tanga digala petu kora yashu insame ji ra ngale la che me tende lo jura tepa doya gi chedra ine yang anzu zamza phagela anzu lelo pandi ga dani le ni bi lelo la jura tini ya no yang ga da dani le ni bi lelo la digala nge tu mare nge jeng mare nga de pa soso pichika minjen ji so sheda wa tanda di mare jen la pa jen la ku ku che rani gi jen gi shen da tu ta ma kare na ngala te na ji me sa ngor ma din te ji dabur sta.
So now, if we are to cultivate an attitude of humility in our interactions with others, we must understand why exactly is it important to cultivate such an attitude of humility in our interactions with others. Now, the most important thing is to overcome any sense of arrogance that we might develop in our interactions with others. And why exactly is it important to overcome arrogance in our interactions with others? Because if we are consumed by a sense of arrogance, then we lose perspective, because we only think about ourselves. We always consider ourselves to be right in a situation all the time. So as such, we will fail to appreciate the true reality of a situation. As opposed to that, it is better to cultivate an attitude of humility, which is confident enough to accommodate all possibilities of a given situation. Now, herein it is important to understand, when we say an attitude of humility, it does not spring from a place of self-pity or a sense of inadequacy, wherein you say that I am incapable, I am not so able. That's not the attitude of humility that is being talked about here. This kind of attitude of humility comes from a place of confidence in you being able to accommodate all possibilities. Because if this is the kind of humility that comes from a place of inadequacy and self-pity, then that's not exactly humility at all. That's from a Buddhist perspective, that's a type of laziness. This sense of inadequacy, and in modern sense of the word, self-pity.
Da sumba di khare la na di da chulam kunde ranji las toji nyomo chima tha da shen maru chiba na chebe nas cente done dokol chi shogos le da tadi khare sungor la na chulam kunde ranji la ngana zu gosung chiba era lu nga yesu la khaza lu la khazu lula number sum ngala shi ani yela sum da tinde ani mege chibo ge sirun la so ta tinde ngazu mege chidi chige na lamsa pa dogo ra kyonlam kon de rani ki khawa drowa ina kare shewa ina ta saje tinde jura ngazu lega kare chewen ra kyonlam kon de sa ranji la kare che ngi na tide gala takji chini ra so riba ji du de mindi ba ji du de ta ngara zo ke che she na re 아니 지금 류게 난주이나래 소소고 산노 땅나래 창벌 간저 따지치고 그랬어. 아니 근데 또 진이스 아니 계속 요모 방저기 차당모성게 생활도 지어 뒤치나. 봐. 지마 탁 남적으로 가지고 막 매버서 컨트롤 치고 그랬어. 지마 주는데 바마가 안 땅샤와이나 아니 가지고 밑에 두르두르 아니 장람 쉬어줘라. 근데 인디가 아니 근데 이 수수기 아니 지금 미션라 마rum바다 근데 이 로 친치 템버지 잼마타 남사 아니 뭐 잼부 우선 남사 막 까버지 매웠어 봐 당가도 때때때신에 개말에 선이 때신에 개말 아니 가도 치치쳐도 매 친주디기 제모좀 차이다 드나세게 응안들로 공부도 두두두 수수기 남사 따지지니 두어디 지게와 하거나 봐 아니 남사 까야다 아니 룽아에서 쥐버디랑 두어쇼 랑셔 두게나 남사 까야도 베케쳐무다 배나가서 이제 타마테니도 이제는 타마가 두어 가셔서는 수 트된라니 거래 아니 추주시네 디파야 쓰고라 이네 지단 다든지 지창도 가리는 수수 장에다 제이 디상 도저도 오더 같이 제이 한번 빼서도 봐 근데도 이네 친주지기 아니 만부사고야 아니 차라도 처음에 돈 지단 템부지 돈은 zu불 팽게서라 셀레게부터는 아니 바루들 라마 바차네 아니 메메바 라메바 나미 참마 풍세다 진짜 담부 친주지가 공부라 봐 디나시 가란서 글로디 딘데 룽아에서 집어 담부 친주지 메레지 강연생이 친주지라 아니 체르체는 아니 바로 투바제 바로 베스레 투르 차고야 되는 차기여라 근데 인자 남상 아주 친주지 마타니 자마서야 돼베 개체보다 아니 레야라브라
So now moving on, verse number 3, in my every action I will watch my mind. And the moment destructive emotions arise, I will confront them strongly and avert them, since they will both hurt me and others. Now this talks about the importance of observing our own minds at all times. And as we already discussed before, if we begin to observe our own minds at all times, then we will also begin to observe the manner in which what arises in the mind shapes the mental state, and that mental state becomes manifest in our actions. So this mental state is nothing other than the destructive emotions, the afflictions such as anger, attachment, and ignorance arising within our mind stream. So it is important that we always observe our mind first to ensure that these afflictions do not give in, that we do not give in to these afflictions and begin to engage in non-virtuous actions of the body, speech, and mind. So it's talking about the importance of cultivating restraint. And if we are to cultivate restraint in not engaging in the non-virtuous actions of the body, speech, and mind, then it falls upon us to observe our mind at all times. And the moment that we begin to notice any kind of negative emotions arising and influencing our thoughts, attitudes, it is important to confront them immediately right there and then. Not to be complacent and say that, okay, it's okay, I was angry, I did this, it's okay, and leave it at that. And not, if you do this, then even though it at that point seems a little bit harmless, but then we create a habitual tendency to be complacent all the time, and not to pay attention to how what arises in our minds effectively shapes our actions and behaviors. So it is important at all times to observe our mind, and the moment we begin to notice afflictions and negative emotions influencing our mental state and our actions, it is important to immediately confront them, saying that this is not effective for me and this is not beneficial for others too, because the moment it manifests in our actions, it not only harms ourselves but others also.
Adi shiloka shibadira. Shibadiga ranshin yimbi simjen dance. Didu trabe non-ton tse ranshin tetan treba tar nipa kawi jinzen shos la. Tadi sundiga la kalana ani ranshin mi kashi shiga ranshin yimba tundo. Keshinare, ndonare, denare, chiglega chene chig tsubudana ta mandiba marunga dana chidin ra. Ranshigi mi yimba tunta. Dujaro ira. Tunzula ranshin yimbi simjen dance. Ani megi cholam ta yapa meju dance ani chikche. Ani idela ani dugbala digala tanda madibala digala gansu dibele le shudini ya midira. Kashi kare chena so chik inje gewele duma hi dibele le pe ngomba shodini ngomba judini tu ta de dibele che la gabu dinira. Tendero thoma dance. 아니야 오늘 등에 잡고 온다더니 로아시 나 사회나래 간지 콜라사야 토야 메바이나 딱 간지 깡이 등에 잡고 뇽더니 섭정고 뇽더니 근데기 아니 가란 통 어디가라 따딜 가르쳐 올라나 남중 간주 미 지금 림보치 때로 니는 가서 슈가라 와 당아서 단다 림보치 때로 람 마시네 지 디상게 잘라래 단첨부 쓰세기 직세 도도는 의로 도 대선을 단체시 쓰고라 근데 진이는 슈지 가고라 디나시 딘데위기 아니 강사 라싱년바다 아니 지 디빌레 슈딩이다 아니 지 나차트라 소보다 등에 잡고 뇽딩이 딘데기 강사 통해 있으나 렌싱이 땐 년바나시 아니 라 렌시 때도 테바 따르래도 렌부치기 때는 간주 가고라 딘데기 강사지 통 어디가라 아니 소소기 니바까위 진지실래 다소소 들어봐 샹다 니제 지세기 휴 아니 짜와 침부지 쓰니 렌부치기 때나지 먼저 들어봐 타도다 치스다 컨트롤 마체네 개와드웨기 아니 로바 주야 라 딘데기 아니 니비 가츠치 지우레송다.
So, moving on, verse number 4. Whenever I see ill-natured beings or those overwhelmed by heavy misdeeds or suffering, I will cherish them as something rare, as though I had found a priceless treasure. So, whenever I see ill-natured beings, so I'm sure we've all come into people who are harsh in the manner in which they speak, rude in the manner in which they treat others. So that's what we mean by whenever I see ill-natured beings, or those overwhelmed by heavy misdeeds. And I'm also sure that we have also come into people who have a natural liking to engage in negative actions, who are always committing non-virtuous actions. And then similarly, or those overwhelmed by heavy misdeeds or suffering, those who are overcome by intense suffering such as sickness, distress, and so forth. So whenever I see ill-natured beings or those overwhelmed by heavy misdeeds or suffering, I will cherish them as something rare, as though I had found a priceless treasure. So similarly, as we talked before about the manner in which we should cherish others, now when we see such beings, ill-natured beings, overcome by heavy misdeeds, or those who are suffering greatly, then we should treat them even as something even rarer than that, like a priceless treasure. For example, if you come into a piece of gold, then imagine the joy, the manner in which you immediately go towards it, take care of it, take it within your possession, take it upon yourself. So similarly, whenever you find such ill-natured beings or those overwhelmed by misdeeds or suffering, then we should learn not to become averse or not to avoid them, but to actively seek them out as objects, supreme objects of love, compassion, care, and concern.
먼저 랑서들 마가 당하는 코미디 두자시오들 수수에 마가요 로도제 라 아니야 라싱이 바디 미 라싱이 바디 통소나 콜레 야부도 주네 먼저 타도 라잉이 가라 아미 두자페 콜레 야부도 주가 실레단도 딘데로 라잉이 가라 이러 지시제 당한테 딘데로들 아니 먼저 그지 타도 빠야든 렌세 빠야도라 다야 파게지 디베일레 치디 딘졸래 잠잠한테 지시랑 제시라 코 딘데 치데 빼아버래 대지스 만들어지 따뜻 코 희지제 유샤로 코 디파사 마음바 아니 여월 도고야다 근데 강에 자기래서 희지제서 유차 줘다 근데 근데 등에 딱 본다 되는데야 산다네 또 코라니 이제 정 한마기 콘레 엔데 치월된 단다든데 중어레스 다 마음바이네 근데 아니 등에 다들 테니 지기 아니 사제고 고만서 타버쇼선에 먼저 만나야지 자이 파주야다 뭐 파게 유칸지 통에는 수수기 미바디파 제보제라 변나 타도지서 유지나 대마제진 단도팔아 콜라 지 야포체라 아니 pe 콜라 때페네 지 디두 잡고 뇽데니들랑 가서 잔자 미 두자지네 콜라 통주데 치스치스라 강이가나 강이 티비가나 도지 땅에 인가라 근데 마제베체네 콜라 되기 찰래야 단도 콜라 파 희지진 코 딘데기 강이 동에 잡고 뇽야디 아니 단데 디기 코로나 뇽야디 타 미치디라 파 뇽고치오 쇼스 마오바에 드네 마요 쇼스 라 아니 다 코로나 딘데기 동에 대바 뇽차네 아니 She's Tabata Taji Koba, Tower Shows. Manzolo, Juju, some Tamusano, the next Tana, and the Kali Solaneta too. Tamuganzo, Logota.
So, as now when we look at such instructions, we should be able to reflect on these instructions by relating it to the manner in which we normally react to such ill-natured beings, those who engage in misdeeds, or those who are overcome by suffering. So, this is exactly the point of this instruction. It is instructing us to change the way we relate to these situations and the way we react to these situations. Because in our societies, if we come into people who are rude, who always engage in negative deeds, then if something good happens to such a person, then you immediately become a little bit jealous, saying that this person doesn't deserve it. And then similarly, when we look at such people, when we come into such people in our societies, then we try to avoid them, looking at them as something unpleasant. And then similarly, it is also the case that sometimes when we are not really mindful, when we see others engaging in negative actions, non-virtuous actions, then if we are not mindful, sometimes we, from one corner of our minds and hearts, sometimes almost appreciate and rejoice in people engaging in negative actions. And similarly, and then when we come into people who are overcome by suffering, intense physical pain, sickness, and so forth, then we immediately, instead of having compassion, love for them, we are overcome by a sense of disgust, pity, and as such, we avoid these peoples. So this is the normal manner in which we are liable to relate to and react to them. Now, as opposed to that, we are advised to cherish them as supreme objects of love, compassion, care, and concern. So maybe to encourage further reflection on this, I ask you this question. In your own lives, have you ever come into contact with such people? And if you did come into contact with such people, were you able to hold them as something precious, something rare, or if you weren't able to, then after reading and thinking about it in this manner, would you be open to holding them as something rare and precious if you do come into contact with such people in the future?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking about my cousin. He had long COVID, and he was bedbound for, I don't know, a year, 2 years. He couldn't do anything. And then he would call me up and we would just chat for 10 or 20 minutes. And I was really trying to be there for him, but I also had a lot on my plate. So every time I called with him, I was there for him, but still it felt like he was a burden to me, since I couldn't carry his suffering. And then, yeah, I went to go and visit him, and it took me so much effort to go and visit him, you know? So there was like a contradiction there that I find hard to explain. Is that similar to what you're talking about here?
Tini Kurang ene digola samal Korean dizamba digdug innar lajora. Lamsan Kurang ki pinja ji chamba soyeng dos semna. Pinja dila ta tanda corona naza duga di lolo digdu lage do mila. Ta losums Kurang ko medical ha deris. Ani cheza ani ko 콜라다 semba masone khabaro tonggesra samsam kama chuni shuskize shidu zamba soso di semba jigo chabo busudo bodo chagidos kogi dongi de soso gi masoi baro kurmoto wado chagidos ene yena ani koda soso ngone shu tapshi chene da kola loga teado yora tende masona da pekhago dosra kogi dongi de soso gi karla kurmato soemato wado chagidosra ene nimaji toga drawings kola toga judu zamba toga joya korangla samlo chusung jogge tango khegi dosra sosongone jik shu shubdawji uzudawji jane jogo khegi dosra tidu zamba ani ta pejembeje dendegi genda dawji lengo dos sem nonglo la ra ene geshema ge tanda sunge di tigarang rebes
tatni role da ra ni je chezong tat nganzon zamzang nganzon phengan ro da teni mi shimba pe suse me ne rasm jen ta pa ju chi shi mi kari ne nganzon tong tin zamzang ta nganzon zamzang che mi ju je la ra manam ma to che mi da manam je ma to nganzon ke ku chi do ne pe na chi chilo ro je mi ma bo ki do da tidu nganzon ta nganzon tv da tin thong ra tidu nganzon ta manam je ra ta konzo tari chi dungi di ge ani kyang hama sa sha ju di ba ta wa sho sa da ta tari ko shi do wa ne ani ten sang bo je le che wa sho sa di ma tu nganzon che am da ra ta tanda ngaran zu ge thele chi na din ro cha din ro sen la ka ngi the din tu nganzo ge ngaran zu ge chi ki lunga ye sang khar che tu de che de pe ke cham da ra de ani kurang ge tanda din de pe na kurang ge pinjan ne ba de le zam zam sen su che ya chi da nganzo sen la jo do ra ngaran sen di wa de jo do se ye ra me kan yu chu ge kurang la la su je ani ta kurang che ke len je na che na she de mai na ta yang 미질레 동해 중원에 동해 중사 들려야 동해 중이 럭바로에는 코드 춘주 차이다. 괜찮다. 아, 딱처럼인데 나대 그래. 추집은 많은 잠니가 안에 강이 되더니 만보여라디가 샘디 괜찮다. 아, 심바야 코라는 zubu가라 강이 치티게 그래. 네가 사는 땅다 나 집불에 엔데 두부지 가르래나라네. 마냐네 치다. 드디어 잠자 저는 좀 말대 엔데 열다. 가시 엔데 내전 매주치는 다라라. 센스체에 베케쳐라. 소도 코로나다 덴데기 투된 지고야 로소체 가르유나 semba kabutuna kolala peke chamda.
So yes, now there are many situations wherein we ourselves become a little bit helpless at points, and even if we try to empathize with them, the situation itself renders us helpless at points. For example, when we see natural disasters such as flash flood and so forth, then even though we feel for the people who are suffering, since the natural disaster has already struck, then there is not really much we can do at that point, except trying to offer them a sense of comfort, trying to offer them shelter and so forth. But that's about the extent of it. There are true suffering that they experience with loss and so forth. We cannot really immediately address that. So as such, in this moment, it is important that we, from the depths of our hearts, accept the situation that now, since I cannot help any further, it is important to, from the depths of your heart, make the aspiration for and prayers for others, that through the suffering that they are encountering right now, may the negative karma that they have accumulated ripen in this moment, and as such, may these negative karmas that they have accumulated be purified through this suffering that they are experiencing now. And now, with that being said, it is important that we be there for them, to lend an ear, to console them in the moments when they are suffering, because more often than that, people need someone to listen to them, someone to console them in these times. For example, if someone is sick, bedridden, and so forth, it is important to be there with them from time to time, to listen to their sorrows. And it is also important that we console them in a manner in which they do not lose perspective, wherein they begin to think only about their own suffering all the time. It is important to advise and console them that this is not an experience that is unique to them, that there are many other people who actually undergo the same kind of suffering, and there are actually many people who have overcome them. So, not to lose hope by not letting them lose perspective.
Tende kono lule lutula kangi thedi neba dula nganzo semla lasu jade pe kechamudara ko luto ge kangi be kana kola yang sanu tanda seng kangi inja thedi intene tende indigal ta nganzo number wachina ani khallagola na chang kya hama ngaranzo le saksha judira mis kang suju mar chang hama susu bisa susu sajide susu nyong kora tende indigal ta nyong gore te tanda chang mi lude la nyong thuadi pe avres ra kasna Migi Ludin and Yotu and Anangola Handos, Amji Kam Yaya, Mekar Tada Sayre, Susu Penja, Roba Chigre, Tangan the Dinde laying a Basasha Shajudi, Jumanya or Yongona. Ra, the Tassa Tensa Saga Mirror, that to do so young damn she, Tindegi Roba Chamber. Chidang nothing on to non chew to the Shawina. Tandagi Nasa Tapo Nadin or Ching Yon into Kyahama Debudi, Tanda Tower somewhat, La, Chidana, Ra. Kisi yani dinde winde but sabchambo le nyamba sabchambo sayana nyala na nyongwa tanga da nambe gi chele kelen jele khina dikhe chele khina koran ta semla de phengra sengam ra ta de mai ke ta chik churo ku kemelenji ine ya misusu suzu la chik nengo mala da chigura ta mi chama chita koran na chan na ni ma ba na ya ne koran gela ma ta da mitu na di gala ku ge di pa sunje chi ya gi 제로 쩨다 다가는 지금도 세리 돌는 게 다니시라 힘인데 간다지 유지라 바까서 되게 만담이 쩨제 나고라 들레인데 그러네 매사야라 아니 칼라사단 간데 지고 들레 마보지 유지래 근데 암지도 깨제트 들라네다 아니 칼리칼리 아타야기 탑시 따야데 깨져무라
So now when people are bedridden and sick, then I think that as compared to the actual physical suffering, the mental suffering is worse actually. And so as such, it is important that we offer support and counseling there in the form of by trying to help them overcome the mental suffering that they go through. Now from a Buddhist perspective, we say that if we begin to experience misfortune, sickness, suffering in this life as a human being, then it is, from one perspective, a very fortunate thing. Because if you experience suffering, misfortunes, and so forth in this human vessel, then you actually do have a support system of people around you. You actually have the ability to actually, in some ways, overcome that suffering. But as opposed to that, if the karma manifests itself not in this lifetime as a human being, but if the karma manifests itself in your lifetime when you were born in a hell realm, then that suffering is totally helpless at that point. You would have to go through that suffering totally alone. So as such, we Buddhists actually appreciate the fact that the karma that we have accumulated in our previous lives is now being purified in the form of misfortunes, suffering, and so forth that we suffer in this human life. So this is a Buddhist way of looking at challenges, misfortunes, and so forth. But if people are not particularly religiously inclined, then it is important, I think, to remind them that when they are sick, their focus and attention shouldn't be totally on being sick. It should be actually focus and effort should be dedicated towards getting better as opposed to being sick. And this many people forget when they become sick. They lose perspective, become so caught up with their misery and suffering that they forget that the whole point of being in a hospital is not to be sick, but to get better. So as such, it is important to kind of remind them of this, so that it takes not just the physical physical care that they receive from the doctors and health professionals and so forth. But if they are, and really we also now do understand that if someone needs to boost or develop their immunity after sickness, then they need to be in a good mental space too. Otherwise, mental suffering actually harms our immunity. So this is important to let them know. Yes.
Pena ngarang nyong tho ro ji shu yin ra. Ngima nga de lak pala ji ti maro mo the yer. Ni gen tu sungu da tandara tu na ya ga yer su kala na che wa dile ani su me ju che akhari ni de yer sungu da. Te na she ge ya ngaz dan da jin de sang da ta su na sa chipul ta de na pe ka ngi chimbur da. Ra. Ti de ngi ta de ga la ngal ta ni man chen do se ma ngima chen ju. 아니 되네 파스 다운데 저러 집어이나래 진저러 오마다 가마 mam보다 알랭아 집어레면서 켄자도 드디 미 통나 니 등이 춘 들어가야 돼 갈라나 제가 나랑 루토래 유지 다가나 되게라 뉴 루마르데 셈래 켄자도 되네 mam보다 아사면도 지금 밀 로퍼를 실리다 미 셈래 데페 켄자래더라 된대기 녀소도
So if I share a personal experience, back in the days, I used to have a lot of skin lesions and a lot of skin wounds, wounds on the skin, on my hand. And now, at that point, I couldn't really go out in the sun a lot because the moment I go out in the sun, then it gets worse. And as such, my teachers at that time used to advise me similarly that you should not become discouraged and think too much about this. You should actually take joy in the fact that this kind of karma manifested while you were a human being, in your lifetime as a human being, because in your lifetime as a human being you have the means to actually cure this, heal these wounds. And then similarly, if I only thought about the fact that I had these wounds and these lesions on my hand, then I think my sense of suffering at that time would have been really, really intense. But I was luckily able to kind of open up my perspective to look at the seniors, so to say, in the monastery, and I noticed that a lot of the seniors also had suffered same kind of problems in the nunnery. So as such, my own sense of being so consumed by that suffering of the wound became mitigated. And this is the strange manner in which the human mind works, that when we become consumed by our own suffering all the time, then that suffering feels bigger, feels much more intense. When we are able to appreciate, when we are able to understand that this suffering is not only unique to us, but that there are many others who have went through the same, then our own sense of suffering becomes a little bit mitigated, less.
미션바 ngara nanyena khul hiji cheda ra naza tagara la min susu naza tagara la min o ngema nge chang hama le ngema sa sha simji shamba gi papa pi nyen dam che jira tinde gi na min de bor san susu ngema che sha de la susu ta juba la ora tinde chi yang chik che ta o ta sinji ni nge gi le ngema tinde chi gi me san ta na susu gi misal hama pa kha ju de na ngema nge che sha ju do nga che me san ku le ta chik le nga san ma mu ta da ra sil kana.
So really, if we reflect carefully on the same, from the same experience of suffering, we can cultivate so many things. For example, if you have like a skin problem and so forth, then rather than being consumed by your own sense of suffering, then you can begin to cultivate compassion and love for others who suffer through the same kind of problem. That's one. Two, then when you begin to experience like skin problems and these kind of problems, it is important to reflect on the fact that this is indeed karma manifesting itself, and as such it comes from a negative action, such as maybe in one of your previous life, you have skinned an animal alive, an action like that. And as such, it is important also to feel compassion for those, towards those sentient beings with whom you have engaged in negative actions, such as skinning them, harming them, hurting them. Then similarly, now on the basis of these reflections, it is also important to develop a sense of regret also over the negative actions that you have engaged in your previous lives, which are manifesting itself in the form of karma in this life. And then on the basis of that regret, to develop the resolve that I will never engage in such kind of negative actions in my life ever again.
tatandang khalla wala nga zu di na mambo ji pe da ten da so yong da kharjin sha go la na ngaran su lo la ra jo tang dusa ji na pa cheng tho de shila pa je jra tende je yo ra lo la sam tan ra tende gi sam tan de pe ki chim yo ta di du ge ma she nga na ra sa ra shin cho sam sen dung za che de ma ra ine ya ngaran zu ne dan kan de ji na ta chana zu shlo la pa da thu na re chi ma ga thu na re ne ba thu na re tende gi kap la ani ngaran zu lo di jo tang ne ra pa pemba duya do da ani shin la thonju ma je chise ma je dense ma je tende gi chise gi yuji thone te pa ju ne tan do ya ga che go tende gi nzu so ya do le ra tan so go ki chim.
So now, as I share a lot of these things with examples, my own personal experiences, and so forth, this is not to burden you with stories of suffering, but this is to try to help you look at the manner in which we normally relate to this kind of people, this kind of situations, and to highlight the fact there is a different way in which we can relate to this. There is a different way in which we can react to these people and to these situations. Because in Tibetan we have a saying, befriending adverse conditions, befriending adverse situations. So what this means is you turn an adverse situation, you turn a setback into an opportunity for spiritual practice. So as opposed to always reacting with disgust, pity, jealousy, aversion to these kind of situations and people, the same people can help us, the same objects can help us cultivate love, compassion, care, and concern. Yeah, Dharmala.
So the original question was something kind if we are able to hold these beings as a treasure, is that correct? How we are dealing with that, right? So for myself, I can say it depends on the stage of my life. When I was a child, so my father is a narcissist, and when you are not devoted, he shouts at you, or even worse. So when I was a child, I was terrified all the time because it was never predictable what happened. Right? And I was not at all able to hold him as a treasure because I was just terrified. But now I grew older, and when this verse saved my life for many times, so I recited it for years every day. And I now found a way to see with compassion his behavior, because he couldn't behave differently, and he still cannot behave differently. And I think he's suffering more, the most by himself with this kind of behavior, because he has no friends anymore. He cut the contact to me when I became young, so he said, "This is not in my expectation. Please never call me again." Fine. And I think now that I really deal with this verse and other things, I really can develop a kind of compassion for him. But it's far away from holding him as a treasure, because I still have flashbacks. So honestly, but let's see, I'm on the path.
그런 디라게스 그런 게 발라지어라 디메베 랑시 첨부 지어랬어 그런 게 삼조도 마치나니 밀라 지조 추네 지기 말했어 아니 계잡된데 지기래 아니 가자나 그런 충분해요라 발라기 시가 된데 바니 하고 있으라 또 진지가 좀보다 소소 신앙 시우지기도 쓰라 미랑시 첨부된데나 그런 게 삼조도 마드나 롱사부 시우 차이도도 왔어 ene tenashi ene chembo cha de zamba ene kurang zumaji chigin la de zamba ene dewa sama che sons tingagi samjodo rema sone churangala dewa somayon lagi dusra ta yina ya ani Quran gi tuitado dedawe ta tanda sijema gi yi tsigandi yora yaendo ani dongyo esra dela ani samrotang thapsi chigyo ani digi garo phinga dusra pigela nyingji gi yuji la tana ani ko sama yabo tana ngone ko rangshi chenbo khaze na thama de la khorang nyang lo das sosolo thobo mejo cherjang haing das ani ko korangi nyingji kiyobe yuji res kaina nas ko korangi shiga de di sosola phengi meba shenla yannugi yoba soso hakugyo maras and cheza ani nyingji cheyobe yungune jire dosra tensa ma ya nya samatang yandizaba ani nyingji cheyobe yuji la ngunzin tu dosra yene tat bet tende rindang dan chewe ni ter rinchin rawo tende tat chetu dus kaina na nyima gi themba dus tandang dis lala shai mudas chiba gi tuzugas
세상 얼른 줘도 이마이나 저배 진주거래 신나다 마가로 저라 다 단다처럼 인지제기 유지차 두다 라 다 갈리갈리 저런 이제 때나시 아질 러 저선 러 공부해라 담보담보 간저 마가와시서 선부체서 유지래나 다 질래 인지제서 유지차다 라 아니 갈리갈리 다다다 거는 거랑 배 인지제서 쪼도 집 인사해로 라 저선 러 인데 줘도다 그래서 잠잠한 저기 미라신 코랑이라신 차보죠. 따와 차보지. 맨날 대상가서 엔데 몸부지도 지 출루도 신바지 전에 신바 나오마도 제주도. 디두가라 콜로 바카테 맞아잖아. 카야마로 코 신기 말에 디가라라. 맨날 현안서 넘버 찾아라야 가시 파만 넘버 많이 베는데 강이 뭐보다. 라. 다큐 넘버 추 대시전에 그 나와 두고 말해. 라. 디디가라 다 추에게 넘버 추이신고 레전드 이제 참으신 거라. 코니 이제 코디 신기요 말해. 카야마로 콜랜데 히져서 요 말해 사이. 텔레 코란 되바따레 코란라 파비 끼치 셴바지 시네 야시르마도 티 지투구데 따네 근데 카투시나 칼카브라 테나시게 단다처럼 빼 앞으로 내게로 콘데 빼야돼 빼케체므라 제가 가지고 따 찰루 마제 큰거 산나다 따 찰루 제찬에 빼체 장은 산다네 지 된대게 거는 좋아하나 야브라 라 된대 고거라마도 가지고 디 콤바 찬지다 콤발 디바 찬지게 오네 산노 야포타는 오네 팽입니다 라 조딩아 미자이나레 다와니나레 셈는 좋았다나 거디는 싫어 집에 미주로 이내야 고마타상 대와이나 최제야 그거 마라와다 된제 마요와 라 아니 뒤수에 마라 되게 비쳐봐도
So this is very, very commendable. This is exactly what mind training is, that there is some transformation, some change. And now if you look at it, when you were young, there was fear, there was a sense of dislike. Now at this point, you look at him as an object of compassion, deserving of compassion. Then slowly, you can also look at him as a priceless treasure. When you look at him, when you are able to train yourself to look at him as a supreme object of compassion. This is the manner in which we can train our minds, Now, and that is exactly the purpose of spirituality, that we train our minds to relate better, relate more mindfully, more wisely to the people, situations in our lives, and then your effort in spirituality has served its purpose. Otherwise, even if we don these robes, assume the appearance of a spiritually ordained person, but if there is no change in our lives, in the manner in which we relate to people, then this is not effective at all. So, now, with that being said, I'm sure that those of us who become interested in study and practice of Buddhism, and then later really do become Buddhists themselves, then I understand that coming from a different cultural background and so forth, it is difficult for your parents, relatives to support this or to accept this. So as such, it is important that in our interactions with them, we try to find a common ground. Rather than saying that now I'm a Buddhist and trying to explain all these things from a Buddhist perspective, it is better to let go of all these Buddhist perspective and to try to approach them human to human on a common ground and to discuss, to talk about what actually you have in common first. This is a much better approach.
당한 수제샤오라.
Okay, we break for tea here.